clubs try and tell us how sensible they are, and say, "Oh, we don't want to go to the last day, etc., etc." But it just happens every single window. It's sometimes you do think, well, why do you wait until the final day? Why did you not get it done earlier? It just makes it a bit more fun, doesn't it? I guess.
Thanks for listening to the latest Beyond the Back Four podcast, available on YouTube and all podcast platforms. Subscribe now so you don't miss a single episode.
Welcome to your midweek episode of Beyond the Back Four. Kieran and Graeme with me as always. We're going to have a big debate this afternoon about whether or not transfer windows are a scam. Sounds controversial, but we're going to look at the history, the context and what's happening now and whether or not there is real value in the transfer market as it exists, or if the world was a better place for football when players could move throughout the season all year round. So, Kieran, for people that have never known football without a transfer window, tell us, how did this happen? How did it come about? What's going on?
We used to have a transfer window for old people like myself, which was open for the whole season and then stopped on the 31st of March. And the reason for that was to stop a club that was going to get relegated signing 5 or 6 players from a club in mid-table to avoid getting relegated, and vice versa and so on. So to try to preserve the integrity of the game. Then in the mid-1990s, we had the legendary Bosman ruling, where a player was prevented from moving on to another club and forced to take lower wages. So his lawyer took the football authorities to court and won. And the lawyer involved, a guy called Jean-Luc Dupont, a Belgian lawyer, is trying to do something similar with the overall transfer system at present. So the European Commission took the view that one of the central principles of European law is freedom of movement. And it's something perhaps we all take for granted, because I can move to another job and you guys can move to another job with relative ease. So why shouldn't this apply to people who are professional athletes in the football industry? The EU got together with UEFA, and UEFA is saying, look, this could be an absolute disaster if you scrapped transfer fees altogether. So therefore they came up, along with FIFA, they all got around the table together and they came up with the solution, which is what we see at present, in that there is a restricted ability to move, but there is still a freedom to move during 2 positions in the year. And that will be agreed effectively on a European basis. And that's why we have what we have today. But it's concentrating effectively 10 or 11 months worth of potential transfer activity into January and what we have in the form of the summer window. So that's why we get giddy during the course of the summer, because there's no football to get giddy about, and why we're in the position that we're in today.
And so for the first 10 years of the Premier League, that was the case. It was an open market. And then 2002, the window comes into play. And obviously you mentioned Bosman. People will know that and they think about, he's leaving on a Bosman, but they won't necessarily know that that was a person who actually, sort of the irony of this is he ended up relatively penniless, didn't he?
Yes, he did. It's a very sad story about Jean-Luc Bosman, but yes, and his lawyer, who I work with on other things which I can't necessarily talk about on this podcast, is best described as a fascinating individual. And every time I WhatsApp him, he inevitably, and this is stereotyping, he inevitably contacts me and says, Kieran, I'm on my bicycle. Because I'm Belgian. That's what we do. That's how we roll.
Makes sense. Graeme, let's look at the transfer market through the prism of the media. From our perspective, it gives us this glorious thing when the football isn't being played. How important is it, do you think, to fans culturally? How different would the game be, do you think, without it?
Oh, massive, from the camera leading to Harry Redknapp's car window to the Andy Carroll celebrations at Liverpool to many others. It's become a real part of our culture now in English football. We'll see that on Monday with the cameras at every ground, etc. I imagine there'll be a few Liverpool fans gathering outside Melwood and their training HQ now, ready for Alexander Isak. It's just really part of our culture now, isn't it? And yeah, it always fascinates me, the transfer window. I'm one of these people where, and I don't know what Kieran's thoughts of this. I think the Premier League. I've always had this idea. I think the Premier League should try and be a bit more dominant, and say, right, our window is going to last till the end of September, mid-October. We don't really care about the rest of Europe, however. We're going to dominate this. Our transfer window is going to open until then, which they are allowed to do. And I do wonder, as I don't know Kieran's thoughts on this, whether the Premier League just being a bit too nice to the rest of Europe, because there's nothing doing this that the Premier League could say, right, our window finishes then, we're going to give ourselves an extra month to hoover up all the talent in the world.
I don't know. Kieran, your thoughts, this would be great, but just to throw an opposite argument your way for the sake of the conversation, I wonder if they would make more sense to make it shorter, so the transfer window, or maybe start it earlier, so the transfer window isn't in play when any football is. Because if we look at Aston Villa, their goalkeeping situation has been exploded by Manchester United, who aren't even now going to sign their goalkeeper, and that's happened during the season.
Well, we did have a situation, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, where the Premier League clubs agreed that the window would slam shut. It's never quietly closed, is it? It's always slam shut before the first match took place, and that would therefore give the coaches and the managers the full season. And it was abandoned very, very quickly because it was felt that it was giving an advantage to Bundesliga, Serie A, La Liga, and so on, because their windows were open for a longer period of time. And certainly that discussion has manifested itself again in some conversations that I've overheard. That there's no simple solution to this. As one manager I was talking to said, if we close it before the start of the season, and in the second match, we're one of the smaller clubs in the Premier League. In the second match, our centre forward does his hamstring. What am I supposed to do for the rest of the season? Because I'm not one of the big 6 clubs. I can't afford to have a 40 million pound plus player on the bench or in the squad. So it actually discriminates against the smaller clubs. So I think what we've ended up is a series of factions within the Premier League. And there are factions within the Premier League on practically every topic, of which the transfer window is one. I'm not a big fan of it myself, because I think it's reflective of a broader issue in society where we think that spending somebody else's money will solve about all my problems in life.
How do you think the window has changed since financial fair play became a factor in football, and then the profit and sustainability rules were put into effect that we see today?
I think it's a negative impact. I should never be on a screen. I should never be on the radio. I do 800 interviews a year, mainly to do with PSR these days, as PSR and rogue owners, it sort of dominates my life. And we go to football because it is the greatest escape from the mundanity of life. And it's not good that you've got blokes in pubs, and it is normally blokes, let's be honest. I appreciate we've got a much broader demographic of people that watch football, but there's far too many blokes in pubs, both before and after matches, discussing PSR, amortization, the use of academies as profit centres, as they are about how useless that new left back is, and the referee needs to get new glasses, which is what we should be celebrating. That's part of sort of the old school joy of football. We now have celebrity accountants and celebrity lawyers in football, and I don't think that's necessarily a good thing for the game.
Graeme, do you think it's inflated prices? Do you think because of the desperation, because we've got this window, because time is running out, and you get days like today where every club is just sort of going a bit mad to try and get deals done in the last minutes, and so much money is being moved around?
To a certain extent, but I think you would have that no matter when the deadline was. Be it if we went back to the old Easter deadline before, or if we moved it to October or whenever, you would still have that. Because teams are always desperate to make changes, and they always love waiting to the very last day in most cases. But yeah, it just creates that pantomime, isn't it? That whole the interest is just the garners is so it's fascinating. It really just the way it plays out. And obviously big part of my job, so I absolutely love it. So, but yeah, I just find it fascinating how it plays out. It really is just an intrinsic part of our game now, and yeah, I just can't see it going away. Unlike VAR that we discussed on a previous pod, I can't see this going away.
So looking at it from your perspective, through your job as a journalist and looking into transfers, speaking to clubs, speaking to players, speaking to intermediaries and agents and so on, and then feeding that back to fans, how interesting do you find it we talked that it was culturally earlier, that fans will celebrate transfers in a way that they would celebrate goals with no idea how that player will do in the future. And the idea of like Arsenal got Eze over Spurs is a thing that Arsenal fans will celebrate and tease Spurs fans for, but with no idea how he'll do. We assume he'll do well because we know he's good, he's played in the Premier League, etc. But there are loads of players that are wildly unsick. I mean, Jack Grealish is now back at Everton, he's doing really well, but that's £100 million he cost.
Yeah, yeah, but you see it from we see the celebrations down to a Morecambe in National League who survived to a ban up to Arsenal. I think it really encroaches on all aspects of the game, all levels, which I think that's the beauty of it. That say someone get excited about that, that few £1,000 signing lowered down to the few million, and that's what I really like. Where deadline day is exciting, as exciting for a fan of Accrington and etc. as it is for an Arsenal fan, for a Middlesbrough fan, for a Plymouth fan. It's equally exciting.
Let's get into some data. I know you like that, Kieran. How far ahead do teams like Liverpool, who we know are the absolute best at this, how far ahead do they start planning which windows they'll be spending X amount of money in?
I don't think they plan on an individual window. They will have a rolling 1, 2, and 3 year project. They will know the ages of their current squad. They will know the expiry dates of both their players and players who may be of interest to them. They will have done their money ball sums, in not from a necessary financial point of view, but it's all about trying to get players that will complement the current setup and complement the current system. And they will be they already know who their targets are, certainly in for summer 2026. But they're also smart enough to realise that football is a very unpredictable game. What happens if one of the players who they thought would still be at Liverpool in 12 months' time has a injury or has a loss of form for whatever reason, and therefore they have to revise their plans. So yes, they know who their first, second, and third picks are for every single position on the pitch for the next 2 to 3 years, and they will also take into account players who will come through who perhaps they hadn't spotted, who are up and coming. The amount of background work that's undertaken by Richard Hughes, and if anybody's read Ian Graham's book, How to Win the Premier League, which is gold dust in terms of the long-term strategy and the fact that FSG believed in the nerds over some of the Liverpool managers, is testament to the club's success.
Talk to us a bit about Arsenal, who were, especially in the post-Emirates years, famous sort of for their austerity in the transfer market, whereas now they are spending as much, if not more, than their rivals.
Well, when Arsenal first had the transition from Highbury to the Emirates, there were very significant capex construction costs of the stadium that absorbed cash. Stan Kroenke is known as Silent Stan for two reasons: A, his unwillingness to talk, and B, his unwillingness to open his wallet. So therefore, Arsenal had to be effectively self-financing to a certain extent. That they did borrow some money, the funds to acquire the Emirates. It then took time to acclimatise. The interest costs were quite significant. That's coming out of the playing budget, although the club benefited from having a bigger stadium. And then I think they made some errors in terms of recruitment, as those interest costs as a proportion of overall revenue started to decrease. The club perhaps got a bit giddy in the in the post-Wenger era, and made some poor signings, and they became legacy problems. Well, it's not right to name the players, but I think everybody can guess who was on very, very significant salaries and not contributing on the pitch. That's now been dealt with, and now they feel that with those salaries out of the equation, Arsenal used to be the second highest payers in the Premier League. That was disrupted by Chelsea. That was disrupted by Manchester City as well. And also Liverpool have overtaken them because Liverpool have been more successful on the pitch over the last decade.
If we talk about Chelsea, we start, I suppose, with their journey being when Roman Abramovich comes in, and then they are known as that club that spends loads of money and starts affecting transfer fees across the market because they're overpaying to get players in and giving high wages, etc. However, from the Todd Boehly years is a totally separate thing, isn't it? Because the spending has absolutely skyrocketed. Are they doing this for football reasons, or are they doing this for financial reasons away from what they're trying to achieve on the football pitch?
It's a really weird one, because if you take a look at the accounts of a company called Blue Coal Holdings, and Blue Coal Holdings owns Chelsea Football Club and it owns Strasbourg, it's lost £500 million in sort of 2 years, which is a phenomenal amount of money. Todd Boehly sees the project as one of being huge disruption to football. He wants to be an innovator. Whether that's going to prove to be successful, and they would argue, look, we're the world champions, so it has been successful. We've won a European trophy, we have been successful. We've qualified for the Champions League, it has been successful. But that certainly is a huge cost. What I think Chelsea do have as a strategy is we're recruiting young players, so therefore they will have value even if they don't work out with us. And where Chelsea don't get credit for is the ability to utilize the academy as, it's a horrible word, this, as a profit center, and that's how it's seen. It's not there to develop young children into talented footballers. That's a sideline. Your main aim is to become an additional revenue stream, and part of the reason for that is that Chelsea have got the lowest capacity. Yeah, they've got 40,000 at Stamford Bridge, perhaps 41. That compares. That's 20,000 less than Liverpool, 20,000 less than two North London clubs. It's 35,000 less than Manchester United, and Manchester City are going to a 60,000 capacity stadium. Chelsea have muttered about doing something, but nothing appears to be getting across the line. So therefore, their way of addressing that is to use the academy. And Conor Gallagher, Mason Mount, Tomori, Tammy Abrahams, you can go down Grant Hall, you go down this incredible list of players where that's the equivalent of an extra 10,000 fans a season.
Graeme, tell us what it's like working on the inside of all of this on days like today, all through the summer, when it comes to January and you get to start again. What is it like working within the window? Because there's so much happening all the time, and there must be so many stories you hear that you just can't quite trust as agents and stuff agitate to try to help players get moves, because we know that stories get planted and so on.
Yeah, you just have to try and see the wood for the trees, really. It's it's a bit of a battle at the moment in the transfer war zone, as it sometimes is. You just have to trust your own sources. I find it really interesting. It's something I've done for so many years now. It's just part and parcel of what we do. Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, it's really interesting where you get the stories from. You can get them from different agents who. My favourite way of getting the story, actually, a little how the sausage is made here. I like it when an agent who has failed with a move rings me and tells me he's seen some of the future deals on the whiteboard or has heard someone talking. They ring me and say, "Oh, I've just had a deal go off here. It's not happening. So I don't care if you know X is trying to sign Y." And they're my favourite ones because intrinsically he has nothing to do with the deal. So yeah, there's a few of those. There's been a few today, I must admit. But yeah, it's really fascinating, and yeah, and we do try our best. I know people listening. We as journalists, we don't make things up. We do try.
Does it feel chaotic for you, or does it feel like, yeah, this is just how business happens? This makes total sense.
Yeah, clubs try and tell us how sensible they are, and say, oh, we don't want to go to the last day, etc., etc. But it just happens every single window. It's that sometimes you do think, well, why do you wait until the final day? Why did you not get this done earlier? It just makes it a bit more fun, doesn't it? I guess.
Let's let's talk about. So the original question of this was: is this a scam? Do you think the window offers genuine value? It makes sense. Is the most sensible way for doing this, or is it a way to increase the money that's being spent, but also during the off season to increase the interaction from football fans who stay incredibly engaged, sometimes during the transfer window more so than they would otherwise?
I don't think it's a scam. But I do think it's just a great. It is a great off-season tool, Sam. Where if we weren't talking about transfers in the summer, what would we be talking about? Yeah, I just think it's so part and parcel of what we do. The windows are really fascinating, and there can be tweaks to it. As you say, do we do it before the teams start playing? I know Tony Pulis was a real advocate for that, wasn't it? He didn't like losing players after his first game had kicked off, which you do see some sense to. But given how long these seasons are now, with the World Cup, we're starting early and early, it's really difficult, isn't it? But no, to answer the question, I don't think it is a scam. But then again, I would say that, wouldn't I?
Yes, you would. Quick question for you. In all the years you've done this, obviously the transfer market isn't consistent. In some years, players that would cost 10 million or 20 million more one year cost 20 million more or less the year before. How do you think the market value is set? Is it by the first big club who buys an expensive player, or is it smaller down, or is it consistent? What's your view on how that happens?
Yeah, it's so tough, isn't it? We've seen Chelsea trying to set the markets at various points. I don't know. Some clubs just draw a line in the sand, and that's where we are. Like who'd have thought that? From someone like Alexander Isak, that deal getting done, where from Newcastle for a long time, 150 million. Otherwise, don't talk to us. It's not happening, etc., etc. And lo and behold, it gets done for less than 130. It's so unpredictable. Every window is completely different. It really is.
Kieran, let's talk about Brighton and Brentford and clubs whose sort of entire financial strategy and success as football clubs relies on finding and identifying players, helping push them on a bit, and then selling them. How difficult is it to see that model from maybe a fan's perspective? Because presumably you never want your best players to leave. And we've talked a lot, and there are so many great players that used to play for Brighton now playing for top clubs around Europe and in the Premier League.
I think you accept it as being part of the pecking order of the Premier League. Brighton can't afford to match the wages of other clubs. I'm old enough to remember when Brighton had the highest paid player in the country, in Michael Robinson, who signed a 10-year contract in 1982 with Brighton. And that was not good because it almost bankrupted the club. So, we know the battle scars of when things go wrong. I think we're quite flattered at Brighton that the club now has a reputation within the football industry. It attracts players because they'll be given the scope to develop themselves. And also the club said to every single player, if somebody comes in and matches our valuation, we wish you all the best. But the club's also smart enough to play hardball when necessary. So if we take a look at the World Cup in Qatar, two of the standout players were Alexis McAllister and Moises Caicedo. A lot of interest in them in the January window, and the club said to both players, "You've got a contract." In the case of Caicedo, who was desperate to leave, just go and train by yourself for a couple of weeks, come back at the end of the window, unless somebody matches our valuation. He came in and he was a model professional, wanted to be a footballer. Brighton got the difference between the 70 million that Arsenal were offering in January and the 105 or 110 million that Chelsea paid. McAllister was fantastic and left Brighton's best wishes to go to Liverpool and has flourished there. It's a lot better having that model than signing a slightly more better known player who trudges along for 2 years and is then sold for half the price. because you are seeing the players you agree. And also, I wouldn't say it's not that nobody wants to be teacher's pet, but at the same time, it's nice to get good grades in whatever you do. And you look at the recruitment of McAllister, Caicedo, Cucurella, Mitoma, and others who have, Mitoma's still there, but who have gone on to prove themselves in the Premier League, to prove themselves in the case of McAllister, a World Cup winner playing for the Premier League champions and so on. And you do say that, to be part of that development is very flattering. So the alternative is being back in the Championship, and I love the Championship, but I've done Rotherham on a Tuesday night, and it's something you don't necessarily need to do more than once.
Right, we are running out of time, so I've got some quick fire transfer window questions for you. Are you ready? So if Graeme, because I know you're busy, if you answer first each time, then Kieran can give us his answer afterwards. So which club, we'll ignore Liverpool from this because they're the obvious answer. Which club's approach to PSR impresses you the most, Graeme?
Nottingham Forest for this window. I think they've had a spectacularly good effort, and quick answer, Forest.
I'm going to say Chelsea. From a PSR point of view, they've done well. Footballing, I'm never qualified to say.
Okay, well, this one is about football. Graeme, a panic buy you'll never forget.
Not a panic buy, but when we did a double deal Middlesbrough when we got the likes of Gaston Ramirez and Stuart Downing back to get us promoted to the Premier League. Last time we got promoted.
Joe at Manchester City. Why?
Yeah, good question. We'll leave that there. So I think I know the answer to this one. Graeme, would you scrap the window or would you keep it? Or I suppose a third option for you, would you change it? Because I know you'd like to extend it.
Yeah, I'd change it and make it bigger and better that the Premier League could become even more dominant.
I'd keep it as is. I like the consistency with the rest of Europe as best it can. I think it would distort the Champions League if you extended it, and I don't think that's good for European football.
Okay, perfect. I think that is probably rounded up everything we want to do. So just before we finish, Kieran, I know you don't like to give us your opinion from a football perspective, but that's what I'm going to ask for. Graham's working away. So the next Brighton player is Baleba, potentially £100 million this window. What do you think will happen in the next one?
I think he will stay with Brighton in January. I think he will go to the World Cup. I think he will have a very good World Cup. And on the back of that, he will go in summer 2026. If he's as good as I think he potentially can be, he will go to a leading club.
Go on, just for the sake of it, pick a club, pick a fee.
I think he could go to Real Madrid for 120 million.
Sure, take it. There you go. Write that down, everybody. Save that clip. There's a very good chance that Kieran's right about everything else. All right. Thank you very much, Graeme. Thank you very much, Kieran. That's it. We'll be back again on Monday talking about the football. Obviously, it's the international break, but that means there's more football to talk about, just different football. Make sure you're subscribed to Beyond the Back 4. You can listen to us wherever you listen to your podcast. We are available on YouTube, sort of everywhere, really. Instagram, we're happening. This is it. Get involved.